We're ready to get started. Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting. It is October 14th. The time is now 7:01 p.m. and all members are present. So I'd like to start in our meeting minutes. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or additions, revisions to the March 4th, 2021 regular session minutes? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the March 4th, 2021 regular session minutes as presented.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Stacy.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Stacy. Oh, I don't do roll calls now. Okay, so all in favor? So we're going to do that now. Aye, okay. Yeah, that passes. Oral communications. Does the school committee have any individual comments they'd like to make this evening? No? Central administration?
I just want to mention that we started our strategic planning process, and we had 3 successful focus groups this week. Parents have come, administrators, and also our municipal leadership. So thank you to all the people that arrived this week. And next week we'll have additional focus groups, and we're excited to begin the 5-year strategic planning process with the community. Can't hear me?
No. That's for HCAT. You just have to speak louder.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm thinking it's projecting further. So the strategic planning process has started, and we'll have focus groups next week as well. And we'll be doing our planning process throughout November and into the beginning of the new calendar year.
Okay. We have, next on the agenda, we have the opportunity for a public to address the school committee, but I'm going to move that till after the presentation so that we have an ability to actually talk about, or ask questions after that. So I'm going to start with Jonah Feldman, who has a presentation he'd like to give to the school committee. Come on up, Jonah.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? My name is Jonah Feldman. I'm a junior at Holliston High School. I'm the junior class president at the high school. I stand before you today because we are requesting for the 2021-2022 school year for junior privileges to leave during lunch to be brought back into the year or into the handbook. Pardon. This was a thing that was around last year due to COVID and spacing guidelines, and we want to bring it back this year for a few various reasons. So in terms of spacing in the building, I think there are various students that have approached me that have just mentioned that they don't necessarily want to stay in the building for lunch, whether that be because they don't want to remove their mask indoors or they find trouble having a good space to eat during the day. And the ability to leave during lunch, now that many juniors have cars, would be very beneficial because it would give them that opportunity to take that mask break, leave, but also it would free up more space for the freshmen and sophomores that do remain in the building. So having juniors leaving for lunch would not only allow those juniors to get a mask break, space out from other people in the building, but also would allow more freshmen and sophomores to space out that stay in the building so that they have more opportunity for that. I'm happy to field questions that anyone might have.
Does anybody have any questions? Amanda, go ahead.
Is this for just lunches or study halls as well?
So this would just be for lunches. So this would be for the first, second, and third lunch blocks during the day.
So right now it's seniors who can leave for lunch?
Correct, yes. Only seniors.
Only seniors, and this is just taking the exact same privilege and giving it to juniors?
Correct, yes.
Dawn.
And is this something that juniors were able to do last year? And this may be for Ms. Bottomley. Juniors were able to do this last year, correct?
Yes, so our current juniors as sophomores last year, for the first 3 quarters of the year, were actually leaving when everyone else was. They were going home, they were eating lunch at home, and then they were zooming into their last block class. In April, when we returned full and in person, then the current juniors actually stayed with those privileges for the rest of the year. So our juniors right now, as sophomores, for the first 3 quarters of the year, were leaving, they were going home, they essentially had those privileges because of the COVID situation. And then our current seniors, as juniors last year, when we returned in April, still had those privileges. So we've had essentially the last school year to demonstrate the abilities of our students to leave and come back to be able to either Zoom in last block or to return to their last block class.
And sorry, I was going to ask, have there been any issues that you know of?
I mean, no issues other than occasionally someone's a little tardy coming back, which is something that is typical.
Right.
I imagine that's a life skill that we want our students to learn as they graduate out of here. I did a little bit of research, and I did notice that Hanover, Wayland, Newton North, Newton South, and Brookline all have something similar. It's considered an open campus policy. And in fact, Newton North says the open campus policy is a key piece of our educational philosophy. We believe that part of our work as educators is to teach students independence skills, understanding rights, privileges, and responsibilities within an open campus is one of the ways we help students to grow and mature. So is this something it was without issue the last 2
Correct.
years for our younger students?
Correct.
And what Dawn mentioned, is that something that you are looking forward to going forward as well, or is it just a policy that you want during the pandemic?
I think in terms of my end, ideally, I think to kind of fit in with Holliston High School's vision of a graduate and sort of building that independence piece, I think this would be something to be considered in the future. However, for the time being, we are just requesting a change to the handbook for this year.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Nice work bringing in vision of a graduate.
I slide it in.
And thank you. I commend you to come and advocate for the junior class on this issue.
Thank you.
So then my question to the committee is, we have a couple of things we could do. We could vote to allow this through this year as a COVID-related issue, or we could vote to make a permanent change to the handbook. Those are usually held for the summer because Ms. Bodlin usually comes before us and brings a whole host of things that we need to approve during the summer. So either any of those are up for grabs. Lisa?
I think I'd prefer to do it just for now and it had a little more
And get some data?
time to make sure
Okay.
how it goes.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we approve junior privileges for the academic year 2021-2022, and we will revisit this issue at the end of the year with some data from Ms. Bodley.
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Stacy.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, and that carries.
Thank you.
Great.
Great to see
Thank you so much.
Dawn.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll call you to follow Dr. Custer?
Good evening again, everyone. And tonight we have a presentation from our Director of SEL and Equity on safe and supportive schools. But I wanted to introduce the topic a little bit and tell you a little bit about the why behind the work that we're beginning here. So this past summer, we had our administrative retreat, and we redefined our definition of educational equity. And the Holliston Public Schools defines educational equity as an intentional systemic approach that ensures successful outcomes and experiences focused on academic, social, and emotional well-being for every individual of our Holliston community. And we really want that to encompass not only our students, but our staff, all of our staff in Holliston Public Schools as a community. So we also redefined some of our focus areas. You'll hear us talk about this in November when we present our district plan, our goals and our improvement plan. So we look at our overarching bridge. Our theme for this year is building bridges together at Holliston Public Schools. And so the bridge has 4 focus areas: innovative teaching opportunities, teaching all students, equitable, safe, and supportive schools, and communication. And again, we'll present more about the details of this at our November meeting. But as you see, the equitable, safe, and supportive schools is a very integral part of all the work that we're doing here, and we'll clarify more about that. So this is tied very intricately with the strategic plan that I mentioned earlier. This fall, we're having our focus groups, community surveys. We're collecting all kinds of data throughout the district at all levels. And then we have started to develop our strategic planning committee. You probably saw that I sent out the 20 members of our team that will be working in November and December and planning this whole 5-year plan together. In the fall and winter, we'll be developing a new mission and vision with goals and priorities and district-wide improvement that we want to focus on as a community, not just the public schools, but the whole community together. Embedded in this, that important arch of our bridge is the equitable, safe, and supportive schools, along with the other focus areas that we identified through the strategic planning process. In the spring, we'll be sharing out the plan that we develop as a community together. And then at the end of the year, we'll be putting forth a proposed 5-year budget. If there are needs that are prioritized throughout the strategic planning process, we'll be able to plan 5 years out. What are the goals that we develop together, and how will we get there as a community? Next fall, we'll begin the implementation of that plan, and we'll put together a review cycle, probably mid-year and end of the year, each year annually, to make sure that we're on target to meet our 5-year plan. So this work that we're having Jariel Vernay, our Director of SEL and Equity, do for us is very important in the strategic planning process. And because this is a new position and we're working on a new plan for how we're going to do this work, we invited Jariel here tonight to share the vision that we have and how this work's going to roll out. We don't have all the pieces together yet because, as I mentioned, we were fortunate to be able to hire this new position, and Jariel Vernay has been a very great addition to our team. But right now, we're still in the beginning stages of what the work will look like. So thank you, Jariel.
Good?
Go ahead.
Right. So, thank you guys for having me. First, I'd like to just say I've appreciated the well wishes from the community. I've appreciated the extended hands and the emails welcoming me to the community, so thank you. I'm hoping today to share a little bit of our trajectory for where we want to be headed when we talk about equitable, safe, and supportive schools. I want to talk about what does this mean, how might this look like, and talk about our why. Like, why do we believe this work is essential as we head into the future? So one of the pieces that I think is essential, anything we do in schools should be about relationships. It should be about impacting relationships in a positive way. So I wanted to share with you guys a little bit, who am I? Right? Because I'm hoping to develop relationships with you, our community, with our students, with our educators. So I wanted to share a little bit about me. So who am I? ¿Quién soy yo? I was born in Puerto Rico, but I grew up in Massachusetts, specifically Springfield, Massachusetts, the home of the Basketball Hall of Fame. Basketball was an integral part of my life. I played youth basketball, I played collegiate basketball, and to this day I coach youth basketball. I think sports and the arts are ways that we could teach real life skills in real ways and impact the youth in many ways. My mom is one of my biggest role models. She herself was a school adjustment counselor just like I. She retired as a school principal in Springfield and showed me what it was like to be in a family and lead and achieve and look towards the future. My wife is from Cape Verde. We are a family of 5, 3 kids. My wife is also an educator. She is an ESL teacher. We work extremely hard to have our home be tricultural. So what I mean by that is we want all of our children to be able to identify and walk all the spaces of being American, being Cape Verdean, and being Puerto Rican, and to be able to make sense of that for them. I love doing this stuff. I love doing professional development. I love just having conversations with educators. You'd be amazed at just the creativity that happens when we can just sit down and have conversations to problem solve. And then, of course, why do we do this work? We do this work for smiling faces. We do this work for our children. There is no perfect playbook, but I think that seeing kids and seeing kids being inspired is what drives all of us and drove all of us into education. So that's a little bit about me. So let me share a little bit about what I've gotten to know about Holliston. So Holliston is actually, in many ways, Holliston is diverse. All of our communities in some ways are diverse. But what does that mean in Holliston? So in Holliston, 19.4% of our whole student body, DESE considers to be diverse, right? That's 20% of all of our students. Amongst our student body, 11% are first language not English, 16%, almost 17% students with disabilities, high needs 25.3%, economically disadvantaged 8.4%. Why do I say this? I say this because diversity is beautiful. And we as a community and we as schools, we have a moral obligation to make sure that we uplift every child who walks through our doors. And just acknowledging the fact that in every community there's diversity speaks to the fact of why we need to make sure that this work is at the front of what we do every day. So the next piece is our why, right? Like, why do we want to do this work? So I want to share with you a little bit about that this work is not new. This is not a new concept. I want to share with you some data, because I think that what speaks bigger than anything is actually looking at some data and saying, is there a need? And then I want to share some voices from the field and then provide some theoretical context as to why do we believe that this work is the right work to do. So I'm not sure if you guys have taken a look at these documents, but we have in most districts a bullying and prevention intervention plan. We also have a district-wide improvement goals and 3-year roadmap that both were established in 2019. And if you take a look at those documents, which are available to the community, those documents call for this kind of work. It calls for us to build schools that are safe and supportive for our students. But I'm going to get into that a little bit deeper. Specifically, if we think about the purpose statement that was in our 3-year roadmap plan, you'll see words such as collaborative problem solvers, being self-aware, being curious, creative, resilient, to be able to contribute to an increasingly complex and interconnected, ever-changing world. That statement screams social-emotional learning. That statement screams resiliency. It screams that in order for students to be curious, to show the knowledge that they have, to be spontaneous thinkers, to be able to advocate, we need to create spaces where that is fermented every day in our classrooms. That speaks to the need for safe and supportive schools. This work, when we talk about safe and supportive schools, and I'm going to provide more context, it's about all students, but it's also about all staff members. And we also wanted to include our community as well. Our parents, our grandparents, our community stakeholders. Creating a safe and supportive school should be part of a safe and supportive community, right? Schools do not sit independently of our community. We are part of that community. But here's the thing. This work does not happen by accident, right? How many times, and this is just even outside of education, we might see a plan that sits on a shelf. This is about taking real plans and real actions and putting them into real life, which means it takes coordination. It takes focus. It takes collaboration across sectors. It takes conversations from school to school. It takes engaging with our community to talk about why do we believe this is important. And in many ways, that's why I'm here. I'm here to think about how do I help and work collaboratively with our amazing leaders who we have in our buildings, with our educators, with our students to think about how do we make this work actually come to life every day. And the last thing I'll say about this is that this is not about perfection, but what this is about every day thinking about how do we continually grow our district and our system to create another better day for another student, for another community. So I talked about data, right? Data speaks louder than words. So in 2018, and this has happened for many years, every 2 years, the Metro West community does a health adolescent survey that happens at our middle schools and high school. So I'm going to share some data that when I had a chance, and I've been here for about 3 months, when I had a chance to look at it, it was striking to me, and I believe it'll do the same for you. So school connectedness. We know that students who feel connected to their schools do better and do well. We also know that when students do not feel connected to the schools, they're more at risk for negative life interactions. The data from this survey, this is from 2018, pre-pandemic, says that when we think about our middle school youth and our high school youth, students who are not connected to school are more likely to experience some of these risk factors. This is mental health and substance abuse. I have children. I'm an educator. When I see this data, this to me screams we need to always be working at this work. The other part, because this is done in the Metro West community and it's done across communities, one of the things that they found is that adult support and school connectedness is lower for some communities, for some students who answered these questions. Specifically, in the Metro West, for non-white youth, LGBTQ youth, youth with disabilities, youth of lower economic status. So that tells me that in the Metro West region, there are some student groups who answer these questions who are saying that they are less connected to adults and to their school, which leads them to be possibly more at risk for some of these outcomes. And if we make that, if we understand that, that means that students in our Holliston public schools could be experiencing this as well. The other piece that jumped out to me is You know, stress can be a healthy thing. I think we all experience stress, but toxic stress also impacts our health outcomes. And we know that as adults. When this was asked, and this is over 1,200 students who answered this survey, 18% of our middle school youth and 35% of our middle school youth said that they were experiencing very stressful experiences in the last 30 days. It's a lot of students. Specifically, we see a huge jump from 10 to 26% in middle school to 20 to 48% respectively in our high school. And I know we can attribute that to some of the rising demands of our education and academics, but we also know that our social situations, our technology that our kids are experiencing every day, we know that's impacting the lives of our students. How is it impacting the lives of our students? Well, that was another question that they asked. Specifically, many youth feel so stressed and anxious and worried that it impacts their daily functioning. We see the huge jump from middle school to high school of how much it's impacting them. But it's impacting their energy level in the classroom, having trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating in school, poor appetite, nutritional issues. If we as a district, which we are high performing, but we want to continue to make sure that our kids are achieving to the levels that we can, this to me is data that we need to pay attention to, which is why we as a school district and as schools need to make sure that our classrooms, our environments are safe and supportive, where students who are struggling or experiencing this have a space to communicate and build some skills. So I know that was dramatic, but the data calls for that kind of conversation. But I also wanted to share some voices from the field.
I think a safe and supportive school is one where everybody's voices, whether it's staff, parents, and especially students, are not only heard and respected, but also really matter and they're valued and they add to the richness of the community.
Okay, so to answer the question, what does it or would it feel like in attending a school that is safe and supportive, where you experience a feeling of being welcomed, valued, included, and in a sense of belonging? I'd say that is definitely RAMS. RAMS includes everybody. We have multiple different clubs, such as GSA, different things like that. There's a lot of group activity and social, and you have a sense of belonging. It just feels, you feel like you belong there, and you feel like you would want to come to school more.
Hi, I am going to voice the opinion of one of our grade 8 students who could not be recorded but did want to share openly. Her name is Malia Harris. She is a grade 8 student. And when asked the question, what does it or would it feel like in attending a school that is safe and supportive, where you experience feeling welcomed, valued, included, and a sense of belonging, she said, attending a school that is safe and supportive would feel, in no better word to describe, amazing. School is stressful, but if you only have to worry about the next test instead of worrying about being included or safe, that is so important. RAMS is an inclusive school, and I am truly grateful for that. So I hope others feel like they have a place in this school as much as I do.
Hi. Safe and supportive Holliston Public Schools are places, for me, where all children from all backgrounds and identities, different races, ethnicities, family structures, sexual orientation, gender identity, abilities, disabilities, don't just get by, but they thrive. And that our schools play an important role in developing students' ability to support each other and become engaged, active citizens, to address the issues of our times. That's what schools need to do. My name is Robert Principe. 3 of my 6 grandchildren are in the Holliston Public Schools, and more importantly, I'm a citizen who knows this work is so important and needs to be done for the future of our town, city, state, country. Thank you.
So, for those other educators who I asked for videos, I apologize. I'm a talker, right? I love just doing this. So I had to cut some of it down. So I had to pick some voices. But as the year goes on, I'm going to be asking for more voices. Because this work is not about my voice. It's not about a voice. But it's about augmenting the voice of our children, of our adolescents, of our youth in our schools. The voice of our educators, the voice of our leaders. So I wanted to share, I wasn't going to take too much time, but I just wanted to share that in this PowerPoint, this will be available online. And something that we're going to make sure that we do this year is have an ongoing terminology, definitions available. Because we acknowledge that even outside of our school walls, there's a lot of conversations happening about what education should look like and be like. So it's important to root what we're talking about in factual definition of how do we define this work here in Holliston. So although I'm not going to go into necessarily the definitions of it, I wanted to let you know that we are going to start making sure that those definitions are available for our community. So when we refer to them, there's a context of what do we mean. So what is a safe and supportive school? In many ways, those voices that I shared said it actually probably better than I could have, right? For that student who said it would be amazing, absolutely. I want my child to go to that school too. But really, what is it? So here's the thing. It's not a quick fix. It is not a curriculum. It's not something that we could buy and do and be done in a year. This is a constant process. It's a constant process of building schools, building classrooms, building experiences where students walk into our doors and they feel safe and supported, period. That's what this work's about. It's a whole school approach. It's making sure that our educators have voice at the table, and not the table, but the room, the space, the conversation. Making sure that our leaders feel supported and aligned. Making sure that we have a vision that speaks to pre-K to 12 plus. Making sure that we're working continually to make sure that that aligns for every student. This work is about community connectedness and relationships. If we think about the survey data that I shared you, that needs to be of the utmost work that we do. We want to make sure that our students feel connected, period. We know that that has healthy outcomes and benefits for all students. And when you look at research that shows students who are high-achieving students, they often report having strong relationships in their schools. That's what this work's about. This work should always be constantly changing and reflecting, right? We want schools that can adapt to the changing needs of our students. Did we ever think that we'd be listening to a pitch about juniors, because of COVID having to take lunch off campus? Or did we ever think that we would be in a pandemic and experiencing and having a school committee with masks? We need schools and we need a community that's ready to adapt to whatever the needs of our children are. This work is about creating learning environments that spark joy. And how do we spark joy? We spark joy by making sure the students are able to see themselves in our classrooms, that we make sure that students are able to voice their voice, discover their voice for learning, to be curious about learning, and to feel safe at being themselves. The same for our educators, and the same for our community. The last piece of a safe and supportive school is making sure that we're looking at data that drives the work. This work cannot be about gut, right? It can't be about things just feel great. We need to know that we're moving in a direction that every day we're getting better. That's one of the things I love about education, I love about schools, right? I don't think I've ever been in a school that says, we're good, we're done, we can walk out the door, our kids have learned everything. Schools are places that every day something's continually think about. Can we get better at that? Is there a better way to teach that? Is there a better way to introduce that? That's what this work needs to be about. But we also need to make sure that we're looking at data that tells us, are we getting better at building classrooms and schools that are safe and supportive for our kids? One of the things that I love to do is walk through our buildings, and I've had the opportunity to, last week I took a walk through our buildings, and I just took a walk our pictures. I took snapshots of pictures. Why did I do that? Because this is the signage that our kids are seeing every day. And at times we might feel like it's just a picture, but these pictures say 1,000 words. How do you want to feel today? That tells students that they have power in their voice, that they can express how they feel and that it's okay. This one captivated me over a bubbler to fill up your water fountain around what to tell myself when I'm feeling discouraged. I sat there and I was like, I need to tell myself this a couple times too, right? But creating a space where it's okay to tell kids you can be discouraged, and let me help you figure out what to do with that. Because that is definitely a life skill. This to me was such an amazing sign. This was outside of a classroom. I didn't get a chance to walk in and ask the teacher who this was. But this said, you are amazing, loved, safe, wonderful. Right? Telling kids and giving them affirmations. But here's the best part. You're the reason I'm here. Letting kids know that I'm here for you. Right? This is social emotional learning at its best. Providing messages and inspiration for our children to let them know that we're here for you. Artwork that just says, hey, there's friendship here at our school for you. The vision of a graduate, prominent through the high school, right? Every one of those 6 character traits within the vision of graduate call for us to create environments where our kids are inspired every day, where they feel safe to be innovative thinkers, to consider themselves a global citizen, to live a balanced life. I mean, I don't know about many in here, but even as adults, we struggle to live a balanced life. I know I do. Right? So helping our students think about what that looks for them when they step out of our high school as a graduate, that's such an amazing learned experience for our kids. Plancentino and Miller both practice Shine and Cares, in which they're looking to always positively reinforce our students, to let them know we see you and we appreciate the effort you're putting in every day. This was just one that I love, and I'm sure if you've worked around education circles, you've seen growth mindset. But just having a visual where maybe you're walking out of the lunchroom and you're saying, I want to give up, but the visual says, I can try a different strategy. Sometimes just providing that language to a child, to an adolescent, to even a staff member, opens up a whole new world of possibilities of what you can do with that information. So these are the signs, but how do we go from science to practice? Right? That's the work. So specifically, how might that happen here in Holliston? Number one, our goal is to create a safe and supportive school district that is combined of safe and supportive schools across the board. That's how we become that kind of district. So how does this happen? Number one is being focused on outcomes, but it's aligning our systems with our practices and then making sure that we have the right data to understand, is the whole system working? I actually like to look at it almost as if you see this picture on the right, you may not be able to see it, but a system of gears. One slight tweak to the right of data can help us look at something completely different to our systems and practices. Enhancing our practices can shift our data. Everything within this circle impacts another. And in the middle lies a safe and supportive school. The work that I'm hoping to engage with this year, and I've already started doing that with our schools, is think about how do we make sure that this is coming live and well at every school. Starting from where they're at, utilizing the structures that they have in place, to think about how do we continue to get better to make sure that this is the kinds of conversations we're having. A global one, a whole school conversation. So how does that happen? Number one, it's every school developing either a safe and supportive team or enhancing a team that they might already have to have these kinds of conversations. We want to be looking at climate and culture data. We want to have conversations around what are the social emotional learning skills we want to develop to get us to that vision of a graduate. What's the educator and staff professional development that we want to have every year? Right? This isn't me sitting here at Central Auckland and saying, we're doing this repeating. No, this is us at every school having conversations and then aligning our conversations to say, what kind of professional do we need to get us to a place where we're more safe and supportive today than we were yesterday? It's developing Tier 1 approaches. So when I say Tier 1, that's another educational term. That means all kids. So developing approaches for every single kid who walks through that door. But it also means having conversations about some of our higher tiered students who might need additional supports and additional interventions. Both those conversations have to happen simultaneously, but they both have to happen to create a safe, supportive school environment. It's almost like I've seen the analogy of a dentist, right? We all might go to the dentist for a cleaning, but we all don't need a filling. And then we also all don't need a root canal, right? There's different supports for different needs. And as a school, we need to develop that kind of system where we can support as needed, but make sure we're also offering supports across the board for all kids. And then why is this important, right? This work is important because as a system and as a district, everything that happens at Placentino directly affects the trajectory at Miller. And everything that Miller wants to do, they need to have direct knowledge and understand what's happening at Placentino. And the same, when our kids are leaving Miller and going to the Rams, we want to make sure that Rams knows fully how to support our students as they come up. And we want Miller to know, okay, Rams is working on this. Let's make sure our kids are ready for that as well. And the same trajectory for the high school. This is about creating not identical systems, but systems that speak to developmentally appropriate, but they're aligned so we see that vision come to life at our schools. So what work will I directly be leading and supporting? Number one, as a leader, I don't see my leader as I'm going to tell people what to do. My leadership style is I collaborate. I collaborate with all of our schools. I collaborate across the community to say, tell me where you're at and let's have a conversation about where we might want to go together. So number one, it's working with each of our schools to think about what a safe and supportive team looks like, and then thinking about how do we establish that. It's about supporting the conversations around PBIS, becoming trauma sensitive and using trauma sensitive practices in our classrooms. Stress reduction practices. If you recall the data I shared, we definitely need to think about how to reduce stress for our students and how do they learn that and internalize that for themselves. Culture proficiency. Making sure that our educators in our schools understand how do I acknowledge the beautiful diversity that every kid walks through our door, and how do I use it in my classroom to enhance my instruction and education. And then just creating inclusive learning environments that are beneficial for our kids and for our educators. It's thinking about how to sustain current SEL practices. You know, our schools have been doing a lot of hard work. In many ways, I've been amazed by the work that's happening here. My work is not to come to a school and say, hey, we should do blank, we should do B. It's to say, tell me about that approach. Tell me about open circle at our elementary schools. Let's talk about second step at our middle schools. Let's talk about advisory. I'd love to learn about what advisory looks at the high school. And then through those conversations, having conversations about how do we continually enhance those. You know, one of the things that is key is making sure that we're utilizing data to drive the work. That 2018 Metro West survey, we do that every 2 years. We're going to have another round of Metro West survey happening this year, and it's going to be essential that between myself, our schools, and our community, we talk about how do we make sure we have, when we get that data, we utilize it to enhance what we're doing. Right? That work should be driving where we go. I plan to start at utilizing the structures we already have in place. If you recall, I shared with you the bullying intervention plan and the 3-year roadmap already had descriptions of what safe and supportive schools are. It talks about professional development. It talks about supporting marginalized communities if identified by data. It talks about making sure that we have classrooms that are inclusive to support everything from bullying to harassment. It speaks about making sure that we're having conversations school-wide to drive that work, right? So that's where I start. I start where we're at. I start where schools are saying they need support with. And then the biggest piece is just making sure that wherever we go, we don't create silos. This work is about making sure that all of our schools and educators feel we are a system. We are doing this work pre-K to 12 plus. I would never want a school to feel like we're just doing our own thing. So part of the work that I want to do is make sure that I can help that happen, or help it happen in a more efficient way. So with that, we've arrived at the end of the journey for today. But I really just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to our educators who've opened their doors to me to just have conversations. I've had clubs invite me to just come and listen. I've had student clubs invite me and say, hey, would you just want to sit in the back and listen to what we're talking about? I've had community members reach out and say, hey, do you just want to grab a cup of coffee, masked or outside, and just share with you our experiences? So I will need that feedback and I will need that collaboration for us to get to the district where we want to become. And that doesn't mean that we're in a negative place, but what it does mean is we always want to be getting better, right? And that's the passion that I bring to the work, and I'm hoping that as a community, you guys support that work as well. Thank you. Slide 9.
So before we have questions, I just wanted to,
Sure.
I don't want to belabor things, but, when you look at that Metro West data from 2018, I've raised 4 adult children myself, and times were not always easy. One of my sons is gay, and he wasn't very well accepted in our environment, but his family accepted him. He, out of my 4 children, I have to say, has the most confidence and seems the most well-rounded, and I think it's because of the environment we provided at home. The school wasn't a safe environment at the time. He didn't get the support at school. So, we have to do better for our kids. I look at that data, and just thinking about the students that are in front of us now, this data is from 2018, pre-pandemic. We know what happened after this, right? We all know what we lived through. Things shut down. Kids were isolated. We had a lot of students remote last year. That is why I really strove to get this position in place. Year 1, the focus is really going to be on that social emotional learning. The equity work is incredibly important as well, but we need to kind of pick up where our students are and what their entry levels are and developing those tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions. So I have asked Jariel to really focus a lot on that work. We are doing lots of work around equity. We're looking at curriculum. There are so many areas we're focusing on. But this data is telling. We're not unique as Holliston. This is data we see in this town, in the Commonwealth, in the country. We hear what's going on around us, right? We can't ignore it. So this work is important for all of us to jump into, dive into, take it seriously. But that data, as an administrator with 27 years, 15 years as a teacher, I worry about kids. And I'm so thankful that we found someone of Jariel's caliber. He has the background. I said when I built this position and we put the job description out, are we going to be lucky enough to find someone that has very strong skills in developing social emotional learning, that social worker background? We have our adjustment counselor background here. But not only that, again, I said we're not going to find the perfect person. It's a little early to tell, Jariel, so I don't want to get But Jariel has come to us with such cultural proficiency as well. So I think we picked a great person for the position. I'm really happy to have him here, and we just want to make sure that he stays with us a long time to do this very difficult work together. So with that, we're very happy to answer any questions that you might have for us tonight.
So we'll start with questions. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to defer to the public to answer their questions first, and then we'll take the school committee's questions. Do you have a list of people that...
Yes, I have a list of people here. If you signed up to do public comment, that'll come after this. So just say as public comment when I call your name as opposed to a question about Jariel's presentation. So first on my list is Bonnie Steinmetter.
Oh, Steinroder. I didn't know that it meant we were going to come in, but since I have the opportunity...
Yeah, if you need to step up to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. I'm interested to know, since we talked about, you were talking about the transition back from COVID. Like, could you say a little bit about how that's going for the students? And because I worry about that too. I'm an older adult, and I've had a lot of trouble transitioning back into my work, my work and my life. And so, do we have special supports in place right now for students to transition back? And then just how do you think that's going overall?
Yeah, each school handles the transition supports differently, but one of the things we are starting to put together right now is trying to look at academic data for some of the skill sets that children have, some of the setbacks they've had there, as well as what children do we think might be really struggling more than in the past and as they re-entered our schools this year. And that's why we did put together, we got some funding from the town using some of the ARPA funds. We got $100,000 worth of grant money, and we're starting to develop some interventions that way. So we don't have all of those set up, but they're in the process of We're trying to have at least 5 different groups at each building, and ongoing throughout the day. At the upper levels, we'll do that more during the school day. Some of it might be offered before and after school at the younger levels. So we're still in the process of developing that. But in addition to that, there's work going on at all schools. And I would not be the one to speak to that just because each building is handling it differently. But I don't know if, Jeriel, you had anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I would add is that, number one of the things that I've been so impressed with is our leaders have amazing collaborations with their counselors. And one of the things that they did when we entered the school year is they started from the beginning of the school year, how are we going to make sure that our relationships are the first thing that we're working on? Because what we know about relationships and what we know about the trauma-sensitive methodology, I didn't get into today, but what that means is that one of the biggest buffers to trauma is positive relationships. So if there was any strategy that we could do when kids were walking through our doors, it was to work with all of our educators, our teachers, and our counselors to think about what does a positive relationship look like in a year like no other. We've never come back from a pandemic. So we had to create what relationships look like this year. So what I can say, and you know, it'll be a conversation for each school to kind of answer how they're using their teams, but I can say that that was a focus of the work, is acknowledging of what's happened in the past to say how do we enhance our relationships right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the list is Sean Mullen.
Public comment.
Okay. Brittany Miller.
Public comment.
Okay. Carrie, is that an A or U? Mutter?
Public comment.
Okay. Jeff Garadella.
How you guys doing this evening? Jeff Gardella. I just have a quick question. I read the job description. I know this maybe is more for year 2.
A microphone?
Oh, it's a microphone?
No.
The microphone doesn't
That goes
project,
to
that's
each
the
category.
television.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I'll speak up a little bit more.
I know, it's hard.
No problem. So I read the job description. I know we're kind of talking about year 1 here in your presentation, but I guess I'm a little bit more concerned with the equity part in year 2. There's a lot of verbiage of anti-racism and anti-bias that we're going to look at the current curriculum with the staff. My question is, how does that trickle down to the students? What does that look like for the students? Because we started off talking about building bridges here, right, in our community, in our classrooms. My concern with when you use words of anti-racism and anti-biases, I hope we're not going to put that on our children, right? Because kids are kids, K through 12, right? They're not perfect, neither are we. But I don't think we're going to be building bridges if we segregate the way some kids think by whether it's kind of evaluations or tests or anything like that. So if you could briefly just go through how the curriculum exercises with the staff trickles down to the kids, I greatly appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
One of the things when you, with the job description in particular, a lot of the work that we define and the work that we need to do is really building capacity of our staff as well and administrators. So the terminology we use with our staff is very different than what we'll use with our students. And it's age appropriate, right? It starts from a very different place in pre-K all the way through 12th grade. But that being said, we all present with biases. And I've done a lot of work myself in my education about it's not that we're bad because we have biases. It's just about getting to know what they are, what they mean, how they shape us. And part of the work that we do is acknowledging that we have them, and it doesn't make us bad or good. It's just they're present within us. So that is a lot of the work we start is what do those conversations look like for the adults we work with? And I'll let Gerald talk more about that capacity building, but a lot of that work starts with the staff, and the work around equity and anti-bias and anti-racism will be with professional development for staff. And then age appropriate will introduce topics within the curriculum. But it's about embracing the diversity we have in the district and making sure that all students' needs are met. So it trickles down in many different ways, and it's not very simple and easy to express it. But there's a lot of work we have to do to even get to that point to have those conversations.
Yeah, and not that I'm pitching here to my teammates, but one of the things that I'd like to share is that part of the role around looking at curriculum in reviewing curriculum is something that our assistant superintendent, Joni Menard, processes that she builds. So why don't I pass it over to maybe just the curriculum review thing?
Sure. So we have a process that we go through. I'm lucky enough to work with some very talented people within the district at all 4 schools that have been identified from their principals and superintendent as the curriculum leaders for those schools. So there's been amazing work done for years, and this console has existed for years, and I'm not quite sure how long. But we get together, we've only got together once, and we get together on a monthly basis. And that committee together looks at the frameworks, Massachusetts has put out a curriculum review process that they call Curate. And the Massachusetts DESE has vetted those curriculum resources as being sound and aligned to the Massachusetts curriculum standards. So then we would start there and then have rich conversations going back and forth at all levels. Would this meet the needs for Holliston students? Yes or no? Jerry L. will be involved in those conversations, as well as Dan McLeod, as well as Kelly Camp. Dan is our tech director, Kelly's our special ed director, and all the principals as well, that we come to a consensus. It's a collaborative process. Again, how Jerry L. said, it's not him making the decisions, it's not me making the decisions. It's putting our collective heads together of our educational experiences and knowing our kids and deciding what's best going to work for our kids within the confines is not the word I'm looking for, but I'm sorry, I can't think of a better word right now, within the structure of the Massachusetts state frameworks.
And are there are parents allowed in that process at all? Is there any room for the
We
parents?
normally don't, but I am more than happy to meet with parents and get feedback. I am more than happy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Email me.
I will. Thank you
Okay.
for your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
The next name is Chinmaya, with a P or a G?
All good. Public comment.
Okay. Dawn Durney Hammond?
Public comment also.
Okay. Robert Principe?
Public comment.
Okay. Tom Evans?
Public comment.
Bud Drummy?
Public comment.
Charlie Coughlin?
Hi, Charlie Coughlin. Well, first off, I want to say thanks to the school committee for, I was a board member with the town and recognize, you guys aren't getting paid for this. It's, not an easy job, so appreciate what you guys do. So, my kids, 10 and 12-year-olds, we feel like we raised them the right way. They're pretty stable kids, etc. But really, my thing goes to, for us as parents, aware of what you're going to be inserting into the programs. And you talked about if you can share with individuals, but share with the community on what will happen after year 1. What's the curriculum going to look like? What sort of changes are going to be in place? And I guess my question is, how would that be communicated out? How do we as parents understand what my 10-year-old, what my 12-year-old, what's additional is being put into the programs?
Take that a little bit. So we are working together as this curriculum console, and we're starting to, hopefully by the end of the year, we will have something that's public for you to view on the website. And that will keep evolving. Dr. Kuska is developing a district newsletter, so I will be putting updates in that district newsletter of the curriculum gains we have made or work that we have been doing. So we're kind of looking at a lot of different vehicles. And then also on the website itself, I would be putting it under the curriculum tabs itself, which I have not started to do yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say a little bit more. When you think of curriculum, people always think of the materials and the resources, right? The curriculum is the state standards. We are obligated to teach the state standards.
Yeah, I'm not using the terminology right.
No, that's okay. I'm just saying I just want people.
Yeah.
So there really is no boxed curriculum that you purchase or resources that are purchased specifically, like buy this program and you can teach anti-bias, right? You know, it's not as simple as that. It's really looking at the resources that we have right now and how can we make them more reflective of the students that are in front of us. And part of the work that I think is really critical, I look at our staff. Our staff is far less diverse than our student body, right? 19% of our students are students of color. Our staff is a much smaller number. So part of the work I need to do better is how do I, as a superintendent, attract and retain and support educators of color, paraprofessionals of color, and we've already started to hire more people. We're really encouraging that. Students deserve to have role models in front of themselves that they can look at and realize that they can become a teacher. They can do these great things. So it's not as much as looking at the simple curriculum. It's about how do we bring in things that reflect who we have in front of us right now. And sometimes that's as simple as, let's look at the books that we're having in our libraries. Are there books that can reflect students that come from Puerto Rico, that students that come from Brazil? It's all of those things. So there's really, I think people always think we're going to just take and put something on top of, and that's not the plan at all. We don't throw out what we're already doing well. It's just how can we enhance it in many different ways. So you're not going to find us saying, this is the new curriculum that we're doing.
Yeah.
But as resources come up and we want to share those resources, yes, that's what you'll hear. These are some great things that we're sharing out to families that we're doing with our students to help this work.
Yeah, I think it really goes to visibility for us as parents. I mean, I'm on top of it, my wife and I are on top of it with our girls, but visibility to everything else that's going on. The other question is, and I'll make it quick, is around data. Like, how will you determine if this is working? If this isn't working, like you talk a lot about data.
Yeah, so some of the data points are necessarily, for instance, if I look at some of these data points, that may not directly talk to how efficient our school is, right? But these data points are data points for us to have conversations about, even as parents and as educators, to say, what do we do about this? That's some data points. Another data point is we need to make sure that we're asking our students, how are they feeling? Right? Because we're having conversations around everything from equity to safe and supportive schools, but we need to make sure that we contextualize from our students, how does it feel like to you when you come into our schools? That doesn't mean interviewing kids, but what it means is being able to develop systems where we do have an opportunity to gather data from our students where they can either answer surveys, etc., in a meaningful way across the district to know, do our students feel safe and supported when they walk through our doors, right? Because if we're not able to capture that data, how will we know? Right? One of the first things that I always do when I'm working with our schools is say, so how do we know? Right? I ask that question. Because before we jump in any trajectory, we want to first think about how would we know we got there? How would we know we got to whatever the goal was? And if the goal is to create safe and supportive schools, we need to make sure that we're capturing data. And who is that data from? We want to hear from our students, right? So we want to develop feedback mechanisms where we get to hear from our students about how they experience school. And if in that data, it tells us that there's gaps, right? For whatever reason, for example, let's say at the high school, female students feel differently. So let's have conversations about what we can do about that, right? Whatever the data says, that's what we address. It's not coming from assumptions or from what we believe. It's coming from those data markers, right? Other markers could be behavior, right? If there's behavior spikes in students because of, let's say, COVID, what do we do about that, right? To me, data is not a gotcha. Data is what do we do about that? Right? And as schools, that's our philosophy. It never should be using data for a negative to scold the classroom or a teacher or a student. It should be about something's not working here. What can we do about that? So that's what I mean by data. The other thing is I don't want to jump in and say exactly, these are the 4 data points, right? Because one of the philosophies I have is I want to make sure that I work with our schools to say, what are the data points that are most meaningful for you as a school to make a decision? To think about how do I improve my classroom every day. You know what I mean? Yep. So I think that as we go into the future, I'm sure there'll be more opportunities where I'll get to share with the school committee or with the school around what are those data points looking like and what are we doing about those.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next name on the list is Susan Rose.
Public comment?
Followed by Deborah Ann DiGiorno.
For the correctness, Deborah -Ann, D -Giorno is with the public comment.
Okay, didn't hear. Tina and Travis Hine.
Nothing.
Joe Lima.
Public comment.
James Robinson.
Question.
So thank you for the presentation. Just two quick questions. So when you talk about the stress level that our students are going through, I think when you look at this generation compared to when I went to school, I think it pre-pandemic was stressful for lots of reasons. And even like my friends' parents say, like raising a child is so much harder now. So like when you look at our kids are more stressed, I think that just overall, like society-wise, we're more stressed. But when you take all that into effect, like I know you haven't been here that long, but like are we red, yellow, green from when you walk in here and you look at our student body and you're concerned about like one thing is stress, like do you walk in saying like we've got a small problem, a medium-sized problem, or a major problem? And the first thing is like, what's that measurement? And then how do you handicap it considering we're in a pandemic? So what's your assessment so far?
So, I don't have an answer to that direct question, right? Because I haven't done that kind of assessment. But here's what I'll say. Number one, I'll second that our kids have a lot of stressors on them even before a pandemic. I remember having a conversation with someone this summer, not this summer, but before the pandemic. We moved into a new neighborhood, and I told my son, why don't you go outside and just go play? Like, get off the technology. And he said to me, play with who? There's no one outside. Everybody's inside behind technology. And you know what that tells me? That tells me that our kids are practicing less social skills. They're practicing less problem solving at a basketball court or at a playground. They're figuring out how to do that behind technology, which tells us a lot about even the coping skills that they're going to be developing because of our transition to this age. And then you add the pandemic to it, where we put it across the United States. We have to jump right into technology. So I second your comment around, I'm really concerned about the stress levels. Now, when it comes to how stressed are our kids? Number one, we will have some data later this year because the Metro West survey is happening again this year. So we will have some more meaningful data. But here's the thing. If I look at that high school data when it says report stress are higher among females and males, that to me is concerning. 48% of 1,200 students, I don't know how many of those were high school, but 48% of those female students that year were indicating high stress, right? And when I look at this trend line, the trend line is going up. So what I see myself is not as like an educator, we need to solve this, but as a community, what do we do to make sure that we're impacting our students to be able to navigate a world that's becoming more stressful around them? For whatever reason. We could say technology, we could, a lot of things, right? So that's what I would say. I also would say that as time goes on, we as a district are want to have conversations for like, how do we know that we're impacting this? If we decide that this is a major something we want to work towards, we also need to decide how might we measure progress in that area, right? And what might be some of those skills we develop, right? How do we help students de-stress? And that's not just about his life, right? Test taking. My wife, as an educator, took some of the educator exams 2-3 times, and she knew the knowledge, but she struggled to put it on paper behind a test. Right? So these are skills that are bigger than just for this. These are skills that I think our students would benefit when we focus on this work.
Okay. It might have been asked in a different way, but so this is kind of I guess, this is an important position from the town, and you're, like you said, you're just starting out. Like I asked you a question, and you said you don't have the answer yet, and that's not an issue. But how are you going to communicate to the town? Because I think a lot of us are going through the learning curve in your space. Like if we were talking about hiring a phys ed teacher, right? Like we've all taken phys ed, we know how that works. But like at least speaking for myself, I'm still trying to learn and appreciate the value of why you're here. And part of what would help with that is to see like you producing deliverables. Like what? So how are you going to communicate to us? Like let's just say with year one, to say like what you're doing, what you're seeing. So that you haven't been able to answer my question today, but I'd expect by the end of the school year, you could tell us, like, hey, we're whatever, red, yellow, green, when you compare us to other towns, we're like doing well, we're ahead of the curve, or we're in the middle of the road. Like, how are you gonna communicate to us what you're seeing and what you're doing?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I won't be able to fully answer that question for you today.
Okay.
Number one is I do believe in data transparency. So I do believe that any data we collect, we need to think about how we share it with the community, because that in many ways justifies the work that we need to be doing. The other piece is a lot of the work that I'll be doing is going to be in direct concert with our schools. So part of also the sharing and communicating is also going to come in partnering with all of our schools to think about what are some of those, I don't want to say just data points, but what's the work looking like at our elementaries, at our middles, and our high schools to make sure we're building a stronger, safe, and supportive school, right? So will I be able to contextualize some of the things that I'm helping lead? Sure.
Yeah.
But also, my gains are our school's gains. So I would never separate and say, this is what I produced or this is what I'm doing. It would always be in concert with our schools to say, here's what we've done together.
Okay. And the last question is maybe more for the superintendent. So is this gentleman's job and his objectives baked into, like, how do we know the teachers are being successful? Like, are you integrating his program and his measurements of success into how you measure your staff?
Well, he'll be working directly with the staff, yes, so that's respect.
That's a given, but I'm saying, is he going to be is his goals going to be integrated into the school's goals? You know, like the teacher's goals. Like, how do we know that the middle school is doing a good job? How do we know each teacher is doing a good job? Is it part of their goals? Like, is this program going to be part of their goals?
Well, I want to say, it isn't a program, it's really, I can't call it a program. It's really just how are we looking at the work that we're doing right now and how can we enhance it and make it better to provide a safer environment, right?
Okay.
So with that, I will say, we have already put together our safe and supportive goals for our focus area within our district improvement plan for this year. And that's directly tied, you'll hear our principals talk about this, and they also have goals within their schools for safe and supportive schools. And then I will be giving my goals very shortly to the school committee,
Okay.
which is going to have an explicit goal tied to this work, as well as my principals are all going to be having goals focused on this work. And yes, that will trickle down to the staff as well.
Okay.
They may, not all staff may pick that same goal, but there is an expectation, as much as possible as we can do this work together, and it fits the work that you're doing as an educator, tie it into this. So many of our staff will have almost the exact same goal worded differently that I do and the principals do in the work they're doing as well. But some may not, because it may not reflect the work that they're focusing on for the year.
So his role is to help those individuals that have that goal reach that goal? Is that what the purpose of the hire was?
Yes, and we want
Okay.
them to feel safe to voice, I need more help with this, and directly reach out to him and/or their principals if they need more supports with it, because we're in this together. You know, it really is. It's a collaborative process. We just want to make this a better place for all students and staff.
All right. Thank you for answering all my questions. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
So is there anybody else on this subject who wanted to ask a question that didn't sign up? Okay.
Okay, so we're going to now move on to, actually, I should ask you guys if you have questions first, and then we'll move on to public comment, okay? Stacey, go ahead.
So, Darielle,
Yes.
your energy was what I needed tonight. So I will say, first of all, thank you. So can we just beat this elephant out of the room? There is an elephant in this room, and what I perceive is going on in our community, and I don't just mean Holliston, I see it all over the place, is that there are two very extreme narratives that are going on out there in the world, and nobody came to talk to the school committee or you or Susan. And so I want that, I think that's why, for me tonight, I did not want to come, right? I did not want to have to sit with this elephant in the room. This has been going on for months. I am so glad that you are here, and I hope that people understand that the schools are not one side of this very, separate narratives, like to the extreme. I'm not an extreme person. I am right down the middle. Sometimes I am flatline. Could you maybe help the community understand, because really some people, what they really want to ask, but they're too afraid to is, are you going to shove this thing called CRT down my kid's throat?
Yeah.
Are you going, not you personally, and please, are you district? So can we just like get this out onto the table and get it out of here and move on with this year? Because we have great work to do, and I think we have hired the right people. And if the community doesn't feel comfortable with that, then they can do, they can show us that through election cycle. But can we maybe just address that elephant?
Sure.
I think you know very well what I'm hearing, as are you.
Yeah, so let me say this. I'm not here to speak to the conversations that are happening outside the building, but here's what I will say. Safe and supportive schools is not about a curriculum. It's about a philosophy. That is not something we will buy. It's not something that we will put on top of. It's not something that we will force on anyone. It is a philosophy and a belief that our schools, we have a moral obligation to support every kid who walks through our door, period. With all of their beautiful diversity, they walk through our door. That's our moral obligation. We are not teaching, and we do not utilize CRT, critical race theory. There are many abbreviations in school systems, right? Everything from IEP, 504, etc. Unfortunately, CRT sounds like a lot of other things too. I've even said the word cultural proficiency. That is not CRT. Cultural proficiency is us utilizing and understanding the beautiful gifts that all our kids bring with them and making sure we enhance those in our classroom spaces. That could have been, for example, a teacher, for me, growing up, knowing what it was like, knowing that I was Puerto Rican, and thinking about, when I do a math lesson, how do I bring up some concepts of Puerto Rico so that any other student from Puerto Rico understands that they're visible in my classroom? That's not forcing anything. That's utilizing the beautiful gifts that we all have, right? That's what this work's about. And I can't, one of the things that I've always tried to approach this work is that, unfortunately, I believe that with truth and with honesty and compassion, that we can get to a different place, that we can often have great conversations. But my role isn't to change the mind of our community. My role is to say, this is what we are doing, and this is why I believe we're doing it, and this is the data that I believe will tell us, here's our why. I was hoping to share with you, community, the why. The data, the voices, the work. That's the why. That's what this work's about. And for all of the time that I've been in education, I don't plan to have conversations about the political conversations happening around us. But here's what I do plan to do, is that if a kid walks through my door, I want to be working with my school to think about how do we support every child? How do we support every educator? A strong, powerful educator impacts a strong, powerful classroom. That's what the work's about.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question? I just wanted to get if each of you had something to ask about. Okay. So now I'm going to bring it up to public comment. We have 11 people that have asked to speak. So just to understand that public comment is an opportunity for you to express your views. It is not a time for the school committee to engage in a debate. So you're just coming up and speaking whatever your mind, whatever you'd like to say. And we're going to give each person 2 minutes to speak, and Dawn is going to be my timekeeper. And we have 11 people, so 11 times 2 is 20, whatever.
22 plus 1.
So that's how much time we're going to take to do public comment. Okay. No additional names at this time. So can you be the first name?
Absolutely. Sean Mullen.
And as you come up for your 2 minutes, please let me know if you want a 30-second reminder. Thank before your time's up. Just want to throw the hand up.
I don't think I'm going to need an extra 30 seconds. All right, I'm Sean Mullen. I was part of the citizen committee that helped to interview the candidates for this position. And I'm super thrilled we wound up hiring Jariel. I wasn't quite sure we were going to be able to get you. Very competitive. I'm also the father of 3 children in the Holliston School District, 2 of which are high needs. The oldest is a Holliston High School student who has anxiety, Tourette syndrome, severe ADHD. We moved to Holliston for its expertise in social emotional learning, so I am thrilled to see that we are continuing to invest in that. And your awareness that children growing up in an age of social media are basically struggling with mental health issues in public 100% of the time is reassuring to me that we recognize this issue. I also have a transgender child, so as I mentioned, I am just very thrilled that you're here and that you're having these conversations about ways in which we can support each other and our children. So thank you.
Brittany Miller.
Hi. So actually, my question was more about that elephant, so thank you for throwing that out there. I have one kindergartner right now and brand new actually to Massachusetts, so learning everything about New England these days. So I guess I've had inconsistent messaging when asking about, are these kids being taught critical race theory? So I actually want to thank you for asking that question. I put my mind at ease a little bit. I appreciate your presentation a ton, so thank you so much for that. Moving from the Midwest, I've heard so many amazing things about Massachusetts schools, so I'm looking forward to the growth here. You know, you talked about mental health a little bit. Obviously, that's extremely, extremely important. I think this is one of the toughest times to be a child and in school, drastically different from my days. But you know, in speaking to the mental health piece, I think that we do need to revisit the masks. And from what I understand, November 1st is the discussion date. Is that correct? For revisiting. What's that? I'm sorry.
November 18th.
Okay. All right. So that is being revisited in regards to the mandate for all school students then at that time?
Well, the November 1st is the date that the Board of Health has mandated masks as well for all public buildings.
Okay.
And the state also has dates out. So for now, our next date to discuss it as a school committee would be November 18th. Okay. And then we'll determine where we are at that time, and we'll be working on policy as well.
Okay. All right. I plan to, be at that one, I think. So that was more or less my topic with CRT for this, obviously, but I just wanted to say thank you for that. But then I plan on speaking to the mask piece at the future state. But I do hope that as we move forward and, my kids 5 and 4 are running around outside and then the neighbors are saying, I can't play with you because you don't have a mask on and we're sitting outside. And I just hope that we're truly, truly thinking about the impact to these kids in the future. So, yep, that's it. Thanks.
Welcome to Massachusetts.
Terry Matter? I can't read the handwriting, sorry. Can you just spell it for me just for the record?
M-U-T-T-E-R.
Okay.
So I understand your claims that CRT is not being taught in Holliston schools. However, what is being taught are principles of critical race theory, lessons on white privilege and systemic racism. Those are advancing CRT ideology, even if they are explicitly labeled CRT. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is what you have changed the name to in order to make it sound appealing and subtle for us parents. Your values and morals are not something that needs to be taught to our children. We refuse to allow you to indoctrinate our children. The job of the school is to teach our children a baseline education, including reading, writing, math, history. We do not send our children to school to have them taught your values. That's our job as parents.
There are laws that have been in effect for decades to protect those with disabilities, race, even sexual orientation. In implementing this DEI, it seems that you're telling us that you're not complying with the laws that are already in place. In fact, when you continue to use those words, equity, which you know means just and fair, and you would also know that this is subjective. Who decides what is just and fair? I believe most parents should know that this is completely arbitrary and will eventually hurt our children. Equity is based on the same outcome for all. We want our children to be challenged academically for a successful future, not indoctrinated into bigoted and racist and sexist beliefs. Thank you.
Chinmaya. Can I get you to spell your last name, please? Gogineni.
G. Gogineni.
Okay.
Thank you for the time. Thank you, folks, for all the great work you're doing. We were one of the reasons I moved to this town. Jeriel, I was part of the committee that worked with all the applicants. I'm very glad we got you. Like Sean was saying, I think this is a coup that we got you. So excited about that. You talked about teaching cultural proficiency. Cultural proficiency, in my mind, I'm the living example. I'm an immigrant. I moved to this country a while ago, a long time ago. I spent a lot more time in this country than where I was born. This is my country now. Cultural proficiency is seeing past that, seeing me for who I am, not the color of my skin. It's not about what's been talked about. I'm not going to politicize the issue. It's not about politics. Let's keep them out of the schools. I want my son to walk into the school and feel like the American he is. No ifs, ands, and buts. Irrespective of his skin color, irrespective of whether he chooses to recognize himself as a male, female, or non-binary or whatever, irrespective of any of that stuff. And last but not least, I don't think, I have a master's, my wife has a PhD. I don't think either of us is qualified enough to teach everything my son needs to be successful in life. So I trust the educators in the public school system to do that. I'm not sending, if we want, we can send my son to a private school, but I don't. I believe in the public school system and the equity and equality that it teaches the kids.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Dawn Durning-Hammond.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I'm just thrilled that we have this position focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social and emotional learning seems so important in our multicultural, complicated world, that our students be developing these skills. And I wanted to thank all of you on the school committee and the search committee and everybody who kind of lobbied and built support for this position. And Jeriel, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you.
Robert Principe.
Good evening. Hi, everybody in Holliston. Tanya's with me as a member of what I'm actually is reading a letter that 119 Holliston citizens signed. I'm going to do excerpts from it. Basically, the 119 are signed on in full support of efforts of the school district to advance social emotional learning and equity as a means to build safe and supportive schools for all Holliston children and all Holliston families. We appreciate the conversations that's taking place across the Holliston about examining the curriculum because we should do that. So we look closely at the curriculum frameworks to look and see what the state says it actually is versus what it isn't. And this is framework number 2 for the entire state. An effective, and this is a framework for history and social science, effective history and social science curriculum incorporates diverse perspectives and knowledge. The perceptions and events are affected by, everybody's perceptions are affected by race, ethnicity, culture, religion, education, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, and personal experiences. The superintendents specifically state that's designed to strengthen student skills to be informed citizens, capable of engaging the issues of our time, participate in the political system. These things are so important. It took 19 campaigns before 19 consecutive Congresses and 72 years to get women the right to vote in this country. 19 consecutive citizens ran those campaigns. The Disability Act in this country was not signed until 1990. Before that time, children with disabilities could be segregated in our schools, excluded in our schools. It wasn't signed until 1990.
Robert, thank you for your comment.
So the letter is submitted to the school committee, and we're signed on in full support of the work. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Tom Evans.
Hi, I'm a Holliston resident. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to say that I've worked at a high school for 30 years. I was an administrator there for 10 years. And we had a program very similar to this. It is extremely rocky road, but it is definitely worth it. People are filled often with a lot of doubts, a lot of fears. It causes a lot of confusion, but it's worth it, and I just encourage people to hang in there and just sort of accept the fact that people are on different parts of this journey, and there's going to be a lot of conflict, but in the end, I think it's worth it. Thank you.
Bud Drummy.
Thanks for the time. Welcome. I'm looking forward to speaking with you live in the coming weeks. So I'm fully supportive of safe and supportive schools. The concept is easy to support. The issue is the implementation. The key is the implementation. The issue is the implementation is underway today. So you suggested earlier that it's very early in the process. I would suggest the opposite. My observations show me the opposite. We are not at a balanced and neutral place here today. We have, I've heard terms in direct conversations with the schools that we need to protect, let me check my notes here, protect marginalized groups. By protecting marginalized groups, we're creating marginalized people. The inclusion piece of it is creating exclusions. There are transparency issues, the use of pronouns, for example. It's perfectly fine to address pronouns as they need to be addressed. There's no issue with that. But the way that I've observed this through my child, I have 3 children in the schools, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th grade, is that pronouns has become sort of agenda-driven. It should be almost a one-time event to understand what the pronouns that want to be used are, and that's it. But there's been repeats with asking for pronouns. There's a wellness survey that has thankfully undergone some revisions because of some feedback, but the content of that wellness survey was very, very inappropriate for an 11-year-old 6th grade student. And the transparency issue is that I may not have even known about the content of the survey if there was enough time for it to be completed during school. So I saw it because it wasn't completed during school. There are questions about, are you comfortable with your sexual identity? Not appropriate for the school to ask that question of a child without the parent's awareness of that. There are questions about whether an 11-year-old feels comfortable talking to their romantic partner. Crazy kind of question to ask an 11-year-old girl. The survey at the first time I saw it, didn't even allow for someone to say not applicable or I choose not to answer. It was rarely, sometimes, and always, probably. So just the structure of the survey itself was inappropriate. So I think transparency is the key, and there needs to be more balanced neutrality. Education needs to be first. The social, cultural, political issues that I see in the schools, literally see,
Thank you, Bud. Your time.
Need to be more transparent.
Susan Rose.
I hope it's okay that my comments are a little bit off topic tonight.
You can talk about whatever you want, just
Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name's Susan Rose, and I'm a parent of a child attending Holliston Public Schools, and I live in Holliston. Please deduct. Yep. Please deduct any response from my time. The COVID-19 injection has caused 752,801 adverse reactions per the CDC. 15,937 is the number of deaths that have occurred as a result of the COVID-19 injection per the CDC. When death is listed as an adverse reaction to anything, one should always have the fundamental human right to give consent without coercion. All American citizens are protected by the United States Constitution, and to infringe on these rights is a direct threat to our liberty and freedoms. On September 9th, 2021, the Holliston School Committee voted unanimously to require all Holliston public school employees to get vaccinated against COVID-19 or they will lose their jobs. And this is coercion, and it's also bullying. The Holliston Public School Student Parent Handbook states very clearly that harassment and threatening behavior of any kind that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment will not be tolerated. Ms. Kuska, you are in direct violation of your own policy signed by you. Ms. Kuska and the school committee, will you be taking full liability and responsibility for any adverse reactions or deaths that occur in any and all public school employees from the COVID-19 injection?
I'm sorry, we're not having a back and forth. It's not a debate. It's just you make a statement. Are you done?
It's a simple yes or no. Who is responsible? Who accepts the liability if something happens to our teachers if they take this vaccine and something happens to them, whether it's death or an adverse reaction?
Susan, thank you for your comment. Your time is up.
So nobody's going to respond?
Public comment is about.
Public comment is not a debate.
Oh, I don't want a debate. I just wanted an answer. That's all.
Deborah Ann DiGiorno.
For the correctness, it's :Deborah-Ann:*D-Giorno. If you're unable to remember that, you may address me as Judge or Your Honor. This is a copy of the porting treaty of my live life claim authorized by the Postmaster General. Here is my document, contract, Federal Postal Vessel, Federal Court Venue, Performance Contract Flag. This is my court. What this porting treaty means is I am authorized to stake a claim, for I am with the knowledge of the correct sentence structure, communications, parse, syntax, grammar, performance. Unless you are with the porting treaty, you are not authorized to stake a claim. You don't have authorization to think. I will speak in plain English for the remainder of my time. I'm going to go right to evidence. The Trial Court of Massachusetts Juvenile Court Department sent a notice addressed to Deborah DiGiorno indicating the claimant as Holliston Public Schools, even though I mailed conditional agreements as directed about whether or not my son is going to be attending Holliston Public Schools. Nobody replied to my letters of conditional agreement. Now, this document here is actually fraudulent. It's written in fictitious grammar, and use of fictitious grammar under violation of U.S. Code 18, Section 1001. Use of fictitious grammar activates bank fraud, mail fraud, an offense punishable by 30 years in prison. So who actually is Holliston Public Schools? Who is responsible for this? This fraudulent claim, 30 years in prison. Who's responsible for this? I want you to know, members of the school committee.
Deborah, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Lima.
Primero, bienvenidos a nuestra comunidad. Estamos muy encantados que estás aquí. I just basically said, what?
Can't hear you.
Oh, I basically said in Spanish, welcome to our community. Because Spanish is my first language. English is my second. I am a first-generation American. I also happen to have come to education later in my career. Everything that you shared with us about social emotional learning, and it's all very top of mind right now. Students are struggling, staff is struggling. We're trying to figure out how to get back into what was a couple of years ago. And that should be the focus, honestly. The other things about diversity and inclusion, the school I work at, I'm a middle school STEM teacher. We have every week there's a new student from Brazil that doesn't speak English. How do I get them incorporated into our school, our community, and get them learning something and try to make them feel safe and welcome? So things take time. I'm looking forward to seeing what the results our school will do, the Metro West Health Survey again. And hopefully we'll get those results and be able to work on things. But it's hard. It's hard work, and we can't do it all at the same time. And it's not a boxed curriculum, as you said. So I just wanted to say welcome. And thank you for this opportunity to share your opinions, or not opinions, but sort of perspective and philosophy with the community. I think there are going to be many more opportunities like this will be needed. So thank you.
So at this time, I will close public comment, and we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is policy. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Custa, about policy GCRD, tutoring for pay. This is a first reading.
So I don't know, Catherine, if you were going to read the policy?
I can come too.
Sure.
Do we want to take a short?
Do you want to take like a minute while people, exit?
Thank you.
My policy
Thank you.
This isn't why you came?
She said, nobody wants to hear my policy. It's not personal. I couldn't just say that. Oh, yeah.
It's so hard. It's really,
Okay.
Thank you, Jariel.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. That's yours. That's yours. That stays.
Okay.
It's okay. I'm sorry. Wasn't speaking English. Here's the color grade. Yeah.
Okay.
Want me to start?
Are we ready for her to read, or do you want to wait on it? I'm ready whenever you are, Catherine.
All right.
So we're just going to do a first reading, Catherine. You're going to take it away.
All right. This is, well, I should have to check first. This is, the one that you put in our packet is the correct one, right?
I don't have it in front of me. GCRD.
Yeah. Looks like it.
It's the, yes, we didn't make
because last time we did this, it was the wrong
No,
one. was the
but
correct
we
one.
didn't make changes to the mask policy, so MASC.
Well, this is the GCRD, the tuition for pay. I'm sorry, tutoring for pay.
Yes.
Okay. So, what's that? Wait. Yes, this is the good part. This is the good part. All right. File GCRD, tutoring for pay. Definition. Tutoring means giving private instruction or help to an individual or group for which the teacher receives remuneration, other than, that's hard to say with a mask on, other than through the school committee. A teacher cannot recommend that one of his or her own students gets tutoring and then be paid to tutor that same student in a second job. A teacher may not tutor students who are currently in their class. Even if the teacher does not recommend that the current student receive private tutoring, the teacher should not tutor current students. Teachers and other public employees may not approach a student or the student's parent, guardians seeking private tutoring work.
A teacher may provide tutoring when the relationship is initiated by the parent or guardians or a student as long as the student is not currently under the teacher's authority. A teacher cannot use school resources such as classrooms or materials in connection with a private tutoring business. A public school employee cannot use a district or district's website to advertise private tutoring services. Schools cannot send home brochures for a particular tutoring service for the children. Tutoring is not to be recommended for a student unless the appropriate teacher of the student involved is consulted and agrees that it will be of real help. If tutoring seems advisable, the principal may give the parent or guardians a list of persons who are willing to tutor. The list may include teachers, but not the student's teacher of the subject in which he or she is being tutored. Tutoring for pay is not to be done in the school building. Do I need to read all that stuff at the bottom?
No, that's fine. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the first reading? Minnie, go ahead.
So can I also, can we also include that, so anyone who is directly related to the teacher might also not tutor? Like for example,
So someone who's related to?
Yes. For example, I'm the teacher and then I'm recommending my son to tutor the child who's in my class.
Okay. Like a relationship we would have.
Yeah.
Like a first.
Immediate family?
Like immediate
Same
family?
immediate family. I mean, we can't go beyond that, I guess.
Maybe after teacher's authority, maybe not under the teacher's authority or part of the family.
Yeah, part of the family.
Yeah. Well, this is a first reading, so it's, just thoughts about what we could do to update it. So, my initial response was that, we just started out with a definition. We didn't really talk about what the purpose of the policy is. So we might want to add, a first introduction as to why we're having the policy. Maybe.
Yes, I can speak to that. I was just a little distracted with.
Of course, yeah.
I have it up in front of me now. So I actually initiated this policy because when I looked on our website, we do not have most of the policies for personnel, which many districts do have a number of policies in that area. So I think it's an area that we should focus on. But the state ethics training guides people about what they should and should not do related to ethical dilemmas that could put us into a mass state ethics violation, and one of those is tutoring. So I felt it was very important that we get this explicitly on the website, even though we are having all staff do their biannual state ethics training every 2 years. All staff have to do that, and we are uploading that and getting that work done. I think it's important that we put the policy in place and get it out to staff as a reminder, just because it gets a little blurry and a little confusing, and we need to be a little bit more explicit about what it means.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I would just ask that we just kind of have just an introduction as to why we're having the policy, just because we tend to do that with all of our
Oh, you
policies.
mean written at the top?
Yeah.
Oh,
like
sorry.
written
I
at
thought
the
you were
top. No, I
asking
did want to know too,
Okay.
because I didn't really know what the genesis of the policy was. But yes, you're well aware that there's like very few policies in the G section, which is about personnel. So, yeah, so that would just not be my thought about it. I'm sure that there's other towns, I don't know, Catherine, whether you want to take a look to see what, say, other surrounding towns have for a similar policy if they have one to help you. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel.
Sure. I think Native has it. I can find out more.
Okay.
And actually, if you go on to the Mass Association of School Committees, there are multiple policies from multiple districts that you can go in and look and see if there's one that you like better than another and borrow the language.
Right.
And Catherine, you should look at use of facilities policy. There's a section on tutoring in there. You just want to make sure they're in sync, that's all.
And we have that policy?
I'm sorry?
In that policy already
In that
exists?
policy, yeah. Use facilities, like KF.
So we want to put that as a legal reference then too?
Well, it's a cross-reference.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. But you just want to make sure they're also in sync. You may need to amend it based on what you do there.
Okay. KF, you said?
KF, yeah.
Is this a policy that you think you'll bring back in November? Is that what you're looking to do, is to bring it back in November for a
The
second?
16th, I think, is our next meeting?
that week of the 18th.
Okay.
To have another meeting, yes, we can.
Okay.
We can massage this. I can't get my words out tonight. You know,
Okay.
we'll work on it.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else have any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, do we have anything for personnel, Dr. Kuska? I didn't have anything.
I do not.
Okay. So reports from subcommittees, communications, I know we have a newsletter. I think we're going to talk about that after I'm just going to save it till the end. Policy, we just talked about. Lisa, do you have a budget update you'd like to offer or no?
Nothing this time.
And we don't have anything for superintendent's evaluation.
Well, I guess we should just add, though, and remind people that we need to attend town meeting on Monday evening at 7:30 in the high school, as it is town meeting.
Yes, it is. So we all need to be there for that.
And our budget item, our capital request is Article 4.
Yes.
And that is this Monday, October 18th, 7:30 p.m. in the high school auditorium.
Yes. And we are posted for us to meet a half an hour before. I believe she put it for 7 o'clock. Yes. Okay. So Lisa posted us for 7 o'clock, just in case we have something to talk about. When I went to the open meeting law training that Dr. Jay Tollerman and Select Board put on, they said that we should be hosting as a school committee, because we're all supposed to be there, so that if we did have to have some incidental discussion while we were at town meeting, that we were covered because we had posted for it. So typically, we usually meet beforehand, and then we all just go in, and there's not really usually much discussion that happens once we go into the meeting, because the town meeting is not our meeting, it's the town's meeting. So, and then we would just adjourn at the end of that meeting. It's, you know, I'll say motion to adjourn to all of us as we're scattered around the room, I'm guessing, so.
And we'll meet here in the library?
We'll start here in the library, and then we'll go into the meeting.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Superintendent's update, Dr. Kuska?
There's been a lot going on, but honestly, it's the biggest thing I think I mentioned it earlier, but I think, you know, given the topic that we discussed tonight around our safe and supportive schools, it's really going to tie nicely with the work we're doing on our strategic plan. And this is not work that we're doing that's brand new. I think that's something that maybe was not driven home enough earlier when we talked, but there are threads of this work that's been going on for years in the school system. It's just, what are we doing pre-K to 12 plus to make sure that we're consistent and articulating it in a way that it transitions with students all the way up. So I think people think that we hired someone to just do brand new work and dump curriculum on, and that's not what we're doing.
Right.
So I really think when you see our work on the strategic plan, it's going to help us. We're getting data from all of our parents in the community. The survey is going to go out hopefully on Monday. Joni and I have been working on that with our TLA, our team, Dr. Gary Mastis, Dr. Borstel, and Mr. Lee, and the survey is going to be open for 2 weeks. Parents will have the opportunity to put any info in there related to culture, community, engagement, you know, all different topics. Anyone in the community can submit survey information and comments and concerns in all those areas. We would like to make sure that we get some way to reach out to some of our former alumni. We talked about maybe the students that have been within the 3 years out, I think it was, 1 to 3 years. So if there is any way to get it to students that we may not have emails for, but anyone that people in the community know, if they can send it to former students that maybe are in college right now or in a career and graduated within the last 3 years, because their perspectives are also very helpful. So we want to gather as much information to inform where do we want to be in 5 years, and then let's work backwards. And what would we do this year, just getting the wheels in motion, but year 1 would be next year implementation, and it's a 5-year process, and we'll help align that with the budget process as well. But I think you're going to see that the work that we're talking about tonight with safe and supportive schools is going to be very much embedded in the 5-year process. And it's not new work. I think people think this is brand new. This is not a new topic. This work has been happening for probably decades in Holliston Public Schools, but in very different ways. And we just want to make sure it's more explicit and consistent in that, as Jariel had said earlier, that it's transitioning. So when my students exit pre-K to 2 and transition over to Miller, that Miller is accepting and knowing the entry points of those children coming into their building. And then as they transition through Miller and exit out of Miller into the middle school, similarly, the teachers and the administration at the middle school know what to expect. What do our students know, and how do they relate together, and what are their needs, social, emotionally, culturally, all of those things. And again, as they transition to high school, we're fortunate in many ways that we have a school system where there's one building that transitions in, so the kids are all getting the same, very similar experience going into the next transition level, and that's a good thing in many ways. But it also creates a very sheltered environment where they're all together all the time, right? So, those are all things that we want to make sure that our students are aware that no matter which building they're in throughout the community, that they're embraced and accepted, and really that's the crux of the work that we're trying to do. So over the next weeks, as we start rolling out the strategic plan, I really think people will start to see the connection as to why this work is so important, and it's going to build upon, the work, and the reason why we hired a director of SEL and equity is to have someone that is really looking at it critically, because I love this work, and I wish I had the time to do more of this work, but it's work that we all have to do together as well. So, I think the strategic plan will answer a lot of the questions that people have as well, and you will have your chance next week to talk about that with our facilitators as well.
So the survey that you mentioned, is that going to be put on the website so we could link to it, or is it that you would send the survey to our specific email and we could forward that on to former students if they wanted to fill it out?
It's going to be a Google survey, so we'll send out the link more than once, but yes, then you can forward the link out as well.
I'm sure there's a mechanism to find out who the class presidents of those classes were, and often those folks are in charge of keeping in touch with alumni and organizing class reunions and that type of thing, so they might be an easy source to be able to reach out to the whole class.
Yes, and I did talk, our high school administrators were here yesterday in our focus group, and I asked them if they have a way, and they did say that they have a way to get it out to students already, so it may be even easier than that.
That's great. And I was lucky enough to be part of that focus group about the parents on Monday, so I'm really looking forward to when we get to meet with them. And just as a preview, they kind of did a lot of getting input from parents about what some of the challenges, the strengths, the opportunities in our district. So I thought it was really thoughtful. It was insightful to hear from different voices, especially some of the younger voices. The survey is going to include information from parents, but also students. Is that correct?
Parents, students, community members, municipal leaders, really anyone in Holliston can fill this out as a resident or as a stakeholder in the school system.
And is it tailored to different ages or different schools, too? Are we asking the parents of Placentino students different things than we would at the high school?
Yes, and we actually just made an edit the other day to make sure that, because I've also talked to the administrators about, can we send this out in school to the middle school students so that they can submit it and get, what do you think's going well? What do you think's in the same at the high school? I think younger than that, we may not get as much detail, but certainly the middle school and high school will be helpful.
So I appreciate the overlap of having a meeting time where we could be in person, but really there was, maybe 24 at best. So the survey is a great mechanism for having this, and I think it's open for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Is it possible with maybe 3 or 4 days left to get an idea of how much participation, so that we can really, make another go of it and reach out to, we just want as much data as we can. So if at all possible, 3 to 5 days before it closes, if we can have some kind of idea of how much participation we've had, so we can push for more.
Yes, because again, I'm going to plan on sending it out hopefully on Monday, and then probably the following Monday, and then a reminder, as you see me do, the day, 2 days before, 1 day before, and we'll get those reminders as well. But we will have the numbers and percentages of who was already submitted. And then, if we don't think we have enough participation, then we are also talked about some other ways and other things we might do after that to get more data. So
Is my understanding the principals were going to put in their newsletter to your link?
Yes.
So it would,
It's going out multiple
as
schools.
well as every school.
The more the merrier.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Question. So we didn't talk a lot about COVID tonight, which is awesome. That's a good sign. But I did want to see if there's any updates on pool testing.
And actually, you'll hear me tomorrow tell you that there were but there were, I think it is 9 cases this week throughout the school district. So we did see a little bit of an increase, and most of those were coming over the weekend. So it helped us in the fact that it was weekend and we had time to do the contact tracing. But it does take a lot of time, and we have a number of kids testing and staying right now. So if you saw Governor Baker's report yesterday, he has now engaged the National Guard. Is supposed to be the next route that we're going to be getting help from the National Guard to do pool testing. Because, as I've shared with some of you before, the state had unfortunately overpromised the ability to help all school districts that submitted for this. And I think we are now, our nurse leader, Missy Jordan, and I have received, I think, 7 different names of coordinators. So every time we engage with a new coordinator that we're all set to go, then that person is no longer with us. And we just yesterday received the next coordinator that's supposed to be able to support us. So it's in a very frustrating process. And we do not have the staffing in place to do that on a regular basis. So I'm hopeful with this new coordinator, we might get some answers, and I hopefully will have better information for you the next time we meet, and maybe a quick update next week if we can add that in. But I may have more answers because I may know when the governor is hopefully getting some of the National Guard, if they can come out and do the testing for us on a regular basis, and that will certainly give us the ability to start it sooner.
I just wanted to ask, the coordinator comes from where?
That's through the CIC,
Okay.
And that's the DESE program. This is the program that was hired by the state. And as I said, unfortunately, they just don't have enough staff themselves. And then they did say, well, if you want to collaborate with other districts and you can provide the staffing, well, the whole point is we don't have the staffing, so I can't provide other staff.
I was just going to ask whether or not you'd been able to fill the floating nurse position.
No, we're still working on that. We've met with a few people. I have some more tomorrow, but just so far, it has not panned out.
And then the Board of Health was supposed to be helping with getting teachers vaccinated. Do you want to?
I saw something tonight that I really didn't have time to read, but that was about flu vaccines.
Yes.
So I did see an update that I think it was at Mansfield, was it?
No, I didn't read
I have to read the
I didn't
email.
read quite that far.
But the Board of Health is working right now, I believe, on helping with flu vaccines.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have that information out to staff as soon as I can
Yeah,
get
so
the
Missy
dates.
Jordan is working with the Board of Health to try to coordinate a flu vaccine clinic or maybe multiple clinics for our educators and staff members in the schools.
I think that's really important, and I think, whatever the Board of Health needs in terms of support advocacy from us.
Yeah.
Cynthia and I certainly shared that with some of the Board of Health members. But I think this is really important. This is a public health issue, and we're a community, and we need to help one another, best we can. So
I think the biggest impediment apparently for them at this point, from my attendance at their meeting this past week, was that they don't have electronic record keeping, and that is now a requirement. So, how they get the funds either to procure it, I don't know if that's a yearly thing or if it's a one-time, cost for them, but I feel like it's something that's really important that we need to start talking about that, about how we can support them from the town's perspective so that they can support all of us.
How do they not have electronic record keeping?
How do they, I'm sorry?
How do they not have electronic record keeping?
Yeah, But I know. They need it. I mean, they need it. So we're here to support them, so I told Josh Mann to do what I can. Okay. Okay, so in new business, we are moving our enrollment report to our November meeting. That information is not available at this time. So, let's see. Newsletter we're going to save to the very end. Okay, so then I guess I will do, look, we don't have anything else. I'm going to move on to warrants.
Tim, before you do that,
Yep.
Is anyone attending MASC in person? Because it's before our next actual meeting, because the next meeting we have is our focus group.
That is, yeah.
Who is
Yes.
actually physically attending? If anyone needs a
Is this
hotel room to...
The conference, yeah, the MASC
Oh,
conference.
yeah.
Yeah, so, sorry. Yeah,
No one else? Okay.
all right, good to know. All right, so I'm going to read
We'll
off.
take good notes for you.
Well, yeah, we'll
I
take
wanted
good
to
notes,
know
we'll
what I
share.
should take the notes. Just
All right, so I'm going to read off the warrants. I have a cafeteria revolving account bill for the amount of $33,280.98. What is this one? I can't even tell. It's a warrant for school department. Why does it not say? Oh, it's a cover sheet, I'm sorry. Okay, it's a school bill warrant in the amount of $136,477.59. a school bill in the amount of $209,383.34, a activity account replenishment request for $6,391.63.
At the high school.
At the high school. Do I need to say that?
Yes.
An activity bill replenishment account for $620.22. Is this also from the high school? Miller School,
Miller.
sorry, from the Miller School. And a school bill in the amount of $314,690.34 that I've signed on behalf of the committee. Okay. That's that. All right. Okay. So items of information in your packet, there should be 2 copies of minutes from the policy subcommittee from this past summer, one from August 17th, 2021, and one from August 24th, 2021. Items for discussion at our next meeting will be the school enrollment data. I think we're going to start talking about budget drivers. Dr. Kuska, some other items for discussion at our next meeting on November 18th.
We should be starting the process then, right, Mr. Matei?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about budget drivers for, as we move into the budget process. And I guess that's it.
Are we discussing test results, both MCAS and the more recent tests that
We were going to do that on, pull up the, do you have the timeline?
I'm sorry.
I know we're doing the district improvement plans and school
Yes.
improvement plans, so I don't think your plan is, I think she's in December.
Not yet.
In December.
Curricular
Yeah.
assessment instruction, I believe, is
We
December.
do have it on the agenda, we have it on the calendar, though, to present.
Okay.
Okay, for December, okay. Great. We do have a brief executive session after this meeting. So are you guys prepared to do the newsletter now, or should we adjourn? And then we can also do our newsletter. We have time at the beginning, and I actually asked her to put the newsletter on for Monday.
So we need we just want to find out some additional information about executive before we can complete one section in it. I think we may have some additional information to put in regarding this evening's presentation. So
Okay.
it probably makes sense, since we have the meeting scheduled for
Okay,
Monday.
so we'll defer it for Monday, and
Defer
we'll
it till
discuss the
Monday.
newsletter content then, because then we'll have more of the information. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I have nothing more on my agenda, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session from which we will not return.
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Stacy.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Stacy. All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call vote. Dr. Savard?
Yes.
Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Ms. Bigelow?
Yes.
Ms. Gupta?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi?
Yes.
Ms. Dvorsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik, yes. The time is now 9:01. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.